Hello, and welcome to my Education 150 Screencast. So, to start things off, this is a picture of me. My name's Katie Rooney. I'm currently a student at Alma College. I'm going into special education and elementary education. Just some other fun facts about me. I love Disney movies. My favorite is Monsters, Inc. by far. I have a love for music. I am in marching band, concert band, clarinet chamber, and I just recently joined choir this year. I put that picture of people there because I just love people. I love learning about different cultures, and just getting to know people is just one of my passions. And I love chickens, so there we have a lovely picture of a chicken. So, to start off, we're going to talk about criterion reference tests. A criterion reference test is designed to measure a student's academic performance against some standard or criteria. This material will be predetermined, and basically it's to learn where a student is sitting and where they might need extra help. So pretty much any school test, maybe pre-testing, standardized testing, it all is criterion referenced. The next page will show a little bit of an image. Okay, so this says on a criterion reference test, an individual student's score is not affected by the performance of their peers. Meaning, even if the whole class does bad, that's showing that they're all not proficient in the same topic area. It's not comparing a specific set of students. Alright, a formative assessment. A formative assessment is basically to see where your students fall. It's typically really low stakes, and it's over a small amount of material, such as a lesson or one unit, and it helps teachers to see where their students are, where they still need help. A summative assessment is also an assessment that evaluates student learning, but basically it's comparing it to some benchmark like the criterion reference test that we talked about. It's usually a lot more high stakes. I'll show some examples in a moment. And it can be used to decide things like if a student can get into a college, if they're going to move on to the next grade level. And basically it's one and done. You don't get a second chance with summative assessments. And an easy way for me to remember this is summative assessment is a sum of everything learned. So here is a little chart comparing the two. Just some examples I'll pull off of the formative side is classwork and homework, exit tickets, quizzes, and a summative assessment would be state assessments, end of unit chapter tests, scores, SAT or ACT type tests, anything along those lines. But obviously they're both ways to assess. They both need to be used, and they can both assist in future lesson plans, whether that be for that student or for your next group of students or whatever it may be. Next, we're going to talk about triangulation. Triangulation is when a teacher uses 3 different sources to measure student learning. The point of this is to get a more accurate measure of student performance. So if you just test them using one method, if they're bad at that particular method, you're not always going to get an accurate representation of how they're actually doing with the content area. This can also show areas where a student may struggle. So, for example, say a student fails being able to have a conversation about something they learned, but they can produce a product for what they learned, whether that be an essay or anything. It shows you that perhaps they struggle with communication skills or understanding on a deeper level. So those can be addressed. So a way to test where students are at is using the Brugant's math grade placement or the reading comprehension. The Brugant's tests are really easy to administrate, and they place students at a certain grade level, so you can plan individualized instruction knowing the areas where they struggle and the grade level they're at. So I know those are hard to read, so I will read them. This is an example of the directions from the Brigance reading test at the primer level. So you would start students at this level and then gradually move on until they're not passing with at least an 80% anymore. So the directions say, this assessment is made by asking the student to read silently one of the two stories, Form A or Form B, on S141 for the primer level. Then the student will listen to 5 questions and answer the questions orally with at least 80% comprehension accuracy. So basically you point to the story you want the student to read and you tell them, I want you to read this story silently. After you have read the story, I will ask you some questions. Tell me the best answer to each question. Then basically you ask them the questions, you get your answers, and you record how many they got right for that specific question. Some examples from this first story would be, what does Gus like to do? Who will play ball? And what will Gus do to be happy? As the test goes on, the questions obviously start getting a little bit more complicated with multiple choice and higher level thinking and more difficult vocabulary and longer reading passages. This is an example of the math. This is also the primer level. This one starts at the first grade level. And that's a picture of the page. And the directions for this one say, give the student a copy of page S383, an inch ruler, and a pencil. Point to section 1 and say, find each sum or difference. Point to section 2 and say, write the tens and ones in each number, and so on and so forth. So it's really self-explanatory. Same deal if they're not passing with, however, with an 80% percentage, which would be 60 out of 20 on this particular test, they shouldn't move on to the next. So after doing the Brigance reading test on one of the students in my placement class, I'm in a high school class, and she actually scored a 2nd grade reading level. Here's an exact graph of her score. So this first column here where she got a 100% was the primer level. Here is the lower 1st grade level. She also got 100%. Now right here is the upper 1st grade level, and she got a 60%. But I knew that she could perform higher than that. I think it was just a minor error. I don't remember exactly what it was, but so I decided to keep moving on because I knew that she could perform higher than that. So we moved on to this column, which is the lower 2nd grade level, and she passed with an 80%. And then at the upper 2nd grade level, that's when I could tell like she really was starting to struggle. And she got 60%, so that's where we stopped, and I determined that she falls at a 2nd grade reading level. So basically, I could see that she had really low comprehension skills and a low level of vocabulary. She was able to get through the passages and finish them, but she had a lot of trouble retaining information she just read. She would read it and then instantly forget or wouldn't be able to apply it to any actual questions. So something you can do with these results is make individualized instruction. So for this particular student, I knew that she loves animals, and so a challenge for me was finding a book to use for a lesson that was at a 2nd grade level but wouldn't be childish to her. And so I looked on A to Z books, and this website provides many resources, and I just typed in her topic of interest, which was animals, and I found an Aesop's Fables book, and I thought that would be perfect because it didn't seem too childish to me. It was more mature. It was about something that she loves, and it could be applied to where she needed some extra help. So as far as an activity, I found this on Reading A to Z. It just provides the resources, And this is a worksheet that basically a student would fill out and complete the chart with the characters and the lessons the characters learned in each story. So while I wouldn't want to just give this to the student to do on their own time, I would assist the student with doing this and applying comprehension skills and asking questions such as, like, which character realized this halfway through the story, or whatever it may be, and using this worksheet more as just a guide to help her with comprehension. I could bring up vocab, really anything that I saw she was struggling with, I could incorporate into using this guide. The website also provides tons of other resources and worksheets and activities depending on the skill level that needs to be worked on, or the skill that needs to be worked on, but this is just one that I picked out that I really liked. Alright, and in conclusion, I spoke about different kinds of testing and triangulation, things along those lines. I discussed how to use the Brigance, which I did not know before. That was new to me, and administering the Brigance and learning how to use the results. And I talked about individualized instruction and how to understand what a student might need help with. So lastly, we're going to talk about teaching reading to students with learning disabilities. Mostly after reading the article, what stuck out to me most was it is really important to know the signs of a reading disability, because it is very easy to mix up somebody who's low achieving and somebody who actually has a reading disability. Something from this lesson that can be applied is using triangulation to understand that difference between low achieving and disabled. Because using just one kind of test will never tell you enough information. It's really important to use different methods of understanding, because it could just be maybe a student has a vision problem, maybe a student is just being lazy. It could really be anything, and so it's important to understand and have early intervention, because once students get to a certain point, it's really hard to catch them back up to grade level. And so there's a lot of strategies that can be used, but overall, it's really mostly important to spend time implementing these strategies to these students who are falling behind using response to intervention. This is obviously really close to a learning disability, because these students need that extra attention and the individualized instruction, and it's important for them to be able to read in order to do any other subject, such as word problems in math or anything. It just all comes back to reading. It's a fundamental skill, and so yes, reading is very important, long story short. So thank you for listening to my screencast. That brings us to the end.